The fever had already stolen 3 days from her. When Anna Emerson realized she would lose the wheat if someone did not help her bring it in by week's end. She stood at the window of her small homestead cabin, gripping the rough wooden frame to keep herself upright, watching the golden stalks bend and sway in the hot Arizona wind that swept across her 40 acres like the breath of something ancient and unforgiving. It was September of 1883, and the harvest season waited for no woman, sick or otherwise. She had been alone on this land for 2 years now, ever since her father had died from a rattlesnake bite while checking the irrigation channels. At 23, Anna had inherited both his determination and his debts, and she had spent every waking hour since his death proving to the men of Quartzsite that a woman could work a claim just as well as any man. She had plowed and planted, mended fences and dug wells, ignored the whispers in town that said she should sell out and find herself a husband. But now, as another wave of dizziness washed over her and her legs threatened to buckle, she wondered if perhaps she had been too proud, too stubborn to ask for help when she needed it most. The knock at her door came just as the sun reached its zenith, turning the desert air into something thick and heavy that stuck in her lungs. Anna made her way slowly across the single room that served as her kitchen, parlor, and bedroom, steadying herself against the table she had built with her own hands. When she opened the door, the bright light made her squint, and for a moment the figure standing there seemed like nothing more than a dark silhouette haloed in gold. "Miss Emerson," the voice said, deep and careful, "I noticed your wheat is ready and your tools are still in the barn. Everything all right?" Anna blinked until her vision cleared enough to recognize Kieran Wyatt, one of the cowboys who worked the massive cattle operation that sprawled across the territory to the north of her property. She had seen him in town a handful of times, had noticed the way he always tipped his hat to her when other men looked right through her, as if she were no more substantial than the dust devils that spun across the desert floor. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water under shade. She guessed him to be perhaps 27 or 28, old enough to have the weathered look that came from years under the relentless sun. "I am managing just fine," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she felt her body sway. She reached out to grab the doorframe, but her hand missed and suddenly she was falling forward. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground, his arms solid and sure around her shoulders. "You are burning up," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Anna want to explain, to defend herself, but she found she did not have the strength for words anymore. The world tilted and darkened around the edges, and the last thing she remembered was being lifted as if she weighed nothing at all. When she woke, the light had changed. Golden afternoon sun slanted through her window at a different angle, and she could hear voices outside, male voices calling to one another in rhythms that spoke of work being done. Anna pushed herself up on her elbows, her head still pounding but clearer than it had been in days, and looked around her cabin. Someone had brought in fresh water and set it on the table beside her bed. Someone had dampened a cloth and laid it across her forehead. And through the window, she could see figures moving through her wheat field with scythes and determination. She got to her feet slowly, testing her balance, and made her way to the door. What she saw when she opened, it made her breath catch in her throat. There were 4 men working her field, their shirts dark with sweat, despite the fact that they had rolled up their sleeves and opened their collars against the heat. Kieran was the closest, swinging his scythe in long, practiced arcs that laid the wheat down in neat rows. Behind him, 3 other men who shared his dark coloring and the same strong line of jaw worked with equal efficiency. Brothers, she realized. He had brought his brothers. Miss Emerson, Kieran called when he noticed her standing in the doorway. He straightened and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt and chaff across his sun-darkened skin. "You should be resting. You should not be doing my work," Anna replied, though her voice lacked the force she intended. She took a step forward and felt the world tilt again, just slightly. Kieran was there in 3 long strides, his hand under her elbow to steady her. Up close, she could see the concern in his eyes, could smell the honest scent of sweat and wheat and something else, something that was just him. "Your work will still be here when you are well," he said. "But if you push yourself now, you might not recover at all. My mother died from a fever she ignored. Started out small, just like yours probably did. Please, Miss Emerson, let us help." The mention of his mother, spoken so plainly, so honestly, took the fight right out of her. Anna nodded slowly and allowed him to guide her back inside, to settle her in the chair by the window where she could watch them work without exhausting herself further. Kieran brought her water and made her promise to drink it all, then went back outside to join his brothers in the field. She watched them work as the afternoon stretched into evening. The brothers moved like parts of a single machine, each one knowing instinctively where the others were, how to work together to bring in the harvest with maximum efficiency. The youngest looked to be perhaps 20, with an easy smile that he flashed whenever he caught her watching through the window. The other 2 were somewhere in between Kieran and the youngest, both solid and strong, both clearly used to hard labor under an unforgiving sun. As the light began to fade and the sky turned the color of fresh blood, Kieran finally called a halt. Anna heard them talking as they gathered the tools and stored them properly in her barn, heard the easy banter of men who knew and trusted one another completely. When Kieran knocked on her door again, the sun was just touching the western horizon, painting the whole world in shades of crimson and gold. "We got about half of it done," he said, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands. "We will be back tomorrow to finish the rest if that is all right with you." Anna stood, finding her legs more stable than they had been earlier. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "I do not even know how to repay you for this." Kieran shook his head. "No repayment necessary, Miss Emerson. Out here, we look after our neighbors. That is just how it is done." He paused, then added more softly, "Besides, I could not let a good woman lose her harvest just because she got sick through no fault of her own. Would not be right." "At least let me feed you," Anna said. "All of you. It is the least I can do." She saw him about to protest and added quickly, "Please, I may not be able to swing a scythe right now, but I can still cook a decent meal." He studied her for a long moment, and Anna found herself unable to look away from his eyes. There was something in them, something warm and steady that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. Finally, Kieran nodded. "If you are sure you are up to it," he said. "My brothers and I would be honored." They came back an hour later, washed and presentable, though their clothes still bore the stains of their labor. Anna had used the time to pull together a meal from what she had in her stores: beans and salt pork and cornbread. Nothing fancy but filling and honest. She set it all on the table and watched as the 4 brothers crowded into her small cabin, somehow making the space feel full and alive in a way it had not been in far too long. "Miss Emerson, these are my brothers," Kieran said as they settled around the table. He pointed to each in turn. "That is Kyle, Kenneth, and Kevin. Boys, this is Miss Anna Emerson, and you will treat her with the utmost respect." "Yes, sir," the youngest one, Kevin, said with that same easy smile. "Though I reckon any woman who can run a homestead on her own already has our respect." They ate with the focused intensity of men who had worked hard and earned their meal. But they also talked, filling her cabin with stories and laughter that Anna found herself drawn into despite her exhaustion. They told her about the cattle ranch they worked for, about the boss who was fair but demanding, about the time Kyle had been thrown from a particularly ornery bronco and landed in a water trough. They asked her about her wheat, about her plans for the season, about how she had managed to keep the claim running after her father passed. "It has not been easy," Anna admitted, "but this land is all I have. It is all he left me, and I intend to honor his memory by making it work." "He would be proud," Kieran said quietly, and the way he said it made Anna believe he truly meant it. The brothers left when full dark had fallen, promising to return at first light to finish the harvest. Anna watched them ride away, 4 silhouettes against the star-bright sky, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural relief of knowing her wheat would be saved, but somewhere deeper she knew it was more than that. There had been something in the way Kieran looked at her, something in the gentle care with which he had caught her when she fell, that spoke of more than simple neighborly concern. She slept deeply that night, her fever finally broken, and woke to the sound of horses and male voices as the Wyatt brothers returned. Anna dressed quickly and braided her hair, then went outside to find them already at work in the field. The morning air was still cool, the sun just beginning to burn off the night chill, and she felt strong enough to help. When she told Kieran as much, he looked skeptical. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Yesterday you could barely stand." "Yesterday I was still fevered," Anna said. "Today I am myself again, and I will not let you do all the work on my own land." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "All right, but if you start to feel weak, you stop immediately." "Understood." "Understood," Anna said, unable to keep the smile from her face. They worked together throughout the morning, and Anna found herself constantly aware of Kieran's presence beside her. He moved with a fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime spent doing physical labor, and he had a way of anticipating where help was needed before anyone had to ask. More than once, she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something between concern and something else, something warmer. By midday, they had finished cutting the wheat, and the brothers began the work of bundling and stacking it in her barn. Anna prepared another meal, this time a proper dinner with chicken she had been saving for a special occasion and vegetables from her small garden. The brothers praised her cooking effusively, and Anna felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. "You have saved my harvest," she said when the meal was finished and they were preparing to leave. "I truly do not know how I can ever repay you for this kindness." "No repayment needed," Kieran said again, but this time he added, "though I wonder if I might be permitted to call on you sometime. Properly, I mean, not just as a neighbor." Anna felt her heart skip in her chest. The other 3 brothers had suddenly become very interested in checking their saddles and adjusting their stirrups, giving Kieran and Anna a moment of privacy despite standing in plain sight. "I would like that very much," she said softly. The smile that spread across Kieran's face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Sunday, then. I could come by after church if you attend." "I attend," Anna said, "and Sunday would be lovely." She watched them ride away again, but this time when Kieran looked back over his shoulder, she was still standing there, and she raised her hand in a wave. He tipped his hat to her, and even from a distance she could see he was smiling. The days between that Tuesday and Sunday stretched out like the desert itself, vast and seemingly endless. Anna spent the time recovering her full strength and beginning the work of threshing the wheat, separating the grain from the chaff using the flail her father had made years ago. It was hard, monotonous work, but she found herself singing as she did it, old songs her mother had taught her, songs about love and longing that suddenly seemed relevant in a way they never had before. On Saturday, she rode into Quartzsite to sell some eggs and buy supplies, and found herself the subject of considerable attention. Mrs. Henderson at the general store wanted to know all about how the Wyatt brothers had helped with her harvest. And old Mr. Patterson at the feed store made a point of telling her that Kieran was a good man, steady and reliable, not the sort to break a woman's heart. Anna found herself blushing at the attention, at the implication that everyone in town had already decided she and Kieran were courting, but she could not bring herself to mind very much. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that made the harsh Arizona summer seem worthwhile. Anna wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes and braided her honey-colored hair into a crown around her head. She rode to church in her small wagon, the same wagon her father had driven, and found herself looking around the congregation for a familiar dark head. Kieran was there with his brothers, all four of them cleaned up and wearing their Sunday best, sitting in the back pew as if ready to make a quick escape if the sermon ran long. When he caught her eye, he smiled, and Anna felt that same warm flutter in her chest. After the service, he made his way through the crowd to her side, leaving his brothers to fend for themselves. "Miss Emerson," he said formally, though his eyes were dancing, "might I have the pleasure of your company this afternoon?" "You might indeed, Mr. Wyatt," Anna replied, matching his formal tone even as she smiled. They drove out to her homestead together, Kieran riding alongside her wagon on his big bay horse. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on everything and nothing at all. He told her about growing up the eldest of four brothers, about how he had taken on the responsibility of helping to raise them after their mother died, and their father had lost himself in grief and whiskey. She told him about her own childhood, about helping her father break this hard land, about the dreams she had of making the homestead into something truly prosperous. At her cabin, Anna prepared coffee, and they sat on the small porch her father had built, looking out over the field where just days ago Kieran and his brothers had worked to save her harvest. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind of easy quiet that came when two people were genuinely at ease in each other's company. "I have been thinking about you," Kieran said after a while, his voice low and serious. "Ever since I caught you in the doorway, I have not been able to get you out of my mind." Anna felt her breath catch. "I have been thinking about you as well," she admitted. "I keep remembering the way you and your brothers worked together, the way you looked after me even though you barely knew me. It meant more than you could possibly know." Kieran turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart race. "I want to know you, Anna," he said, using her given name for the first time. "I want to know everything about you, what you dream about, what you fear, what makes you laugh. I want to court you properly if you will have me." "Yes," Anna said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that too." He reached over and took her hand, his palm warm and calloused against hers, and they sat like that until the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. When Kieran finally rose to leave, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I will see you soon," he promised, and Anna believed him. True to his word, Kieran came calling every Sunday after that, and sometimes on Wednesday evenings when his work permitted. Each visit, Anna learned something new about him, uncovered another layer of the man beneath the cowboy exterior. She learned that he could play the harmonica, that he had taught himself to read from a battered copy of Shakespeare someone had left behind at the ranch, that he dreamed of someday having land of his own, where he could raise horses instead of cattle. He was patient and kind, quick to laugh but serious when the situation called for it. And Anna found herself falling for him a little more with each passing day. October gave way to November, and the weather turned cooler. Anna sold her wheat in town and managed to pay down a good portion of her father's debts, leaving her with enough left over to buy seed for the spring planting and even a new dress, one she chose specifically because the green brought out the gold in her hair. She wore it the next time Kieran came calling, and the way his eyes widened when he saw her made the expense more than worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the honesty in his voice made her blush. They took a walk that day, following the irrigation channels out toward the small creek that marked the eastern boundary of her property. The cottonwoods along the water had turned gold with the season, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet. Kieran held her hand as they walked, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm that made her skin tingle with awareness. "Anna," he said when they reached a spot where the creek pooled into something almost deep enough to be called a pond. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made her turn to face him fully. "What is it?" "My contract with the ranch ends in the spring," Kieran said. "The boss has offered to extend it, but I have been thinking about what I really want. And what I want is land of my own, a place where I can build something permanent. I have been saving for years, and I think I finally have enough to make a start." Anna felt her heart sink. "Where would you go?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady even though the thought of him leaving made her chest ache. "That is just it," Kieran said, and now he took both her hands in his, holding them against his chest so she could feel the strong, steady beat of his heart. "I do not want to go anywhere. I want to stay right here in Quartzsite, and I want to build my future with you if you will have me." For a moment, Anna could only stare at him, certain she must have misheard. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you, Anna Emerson," Kieran said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling in love with you the first time I saw you in town, standing up to Marcus Green when he tried to cheat you on the price of feed. I fell harder when I caught you in your doorway and saw the strength in you, even in the midst of sickness. And I have been falling ever since, every time I see you, every time I hear you laugh. I want to marry you, Anna. I want to help you work this land and build a life together. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are beside me. Will you have me?" Tears sprang to Anna's eyes, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of love so overwhelming she felt like she might burst with it. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Kieran, I will marry you. I love you. I love you so much." He pulled her into his arms then, and when he kissed her, it was gentle at first, almost reverent, and then deeper as she pressed closer to him. Anna had been kissed before, clumsy stolen kisses from boys who did not matter, but this was different. This was Kieran, the man who had saved her harvest, who had shown her kindness when she needed it most, who had proven himself time and again to be honorable and true. This was the man she was going to marry, and the knowledge filled her with a happiness so fierce and bright, it felt like the sun itself had taken up residence in her chest. They married in January of 1884, in the small church in Quartzsite with half the town in attendance. Anna wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Henderson had helped her order from a catalog, and Kieran wore a new suit that made him look almost painfully handsome. His brothers stood up with him, and Sarah Miller, Anna's closest friend from town, stood beside her. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the reverend pronounced them man and wife, Kieran kissed her with a passion that made several of the older ladies fan themselves vigorously. The reception was held at the town hall, with food brought by seemingly every family in Quartzsite and music provided by a fiddle player who had wandered into town the week before and decided to stay. Anna danced with her new husband, her feet barely touching the floor, and accepted congratulations from neighbors who had once looked at her with pity, but now regarded her with something closer to envy. "You did well for yourself," Mrs. Henderson said, patting Anna's hand. "That Kieran is a good man, and those brothers of his are fine young men as well. You will have help working that land now." "We will work it together," Anna corrected gently. "As partners." Mrs. Henderson smiled. "Even better," she said. Kieran had used his savings to buy the 40 acres adjacent to Anna's property, doubling the size of their homestead, and giving them enough land to plant wheat and raise horses both. His brothers helped them build an addition onto the cabin, expanding it into a proper house with 2 bedrooms and a real parlor. It was hard work, but it was good work, the kind that left them tired but satisfied at the end of each day. The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. There were late frosts that threatened the wheat, a dry spell in June that had them hauling water from the creek to keep the crops alive, a disagreement about whether to invest in chickens, or another plow that ended with Anna crying and Kieran storming off to cool down in the barn. But through it all, their love remained steady and strong. They learned how to fight fair, how to compromise, how to support each other through the difficult times and celebrate together during the good ones. At night, they would lie together in the bed Kieran had built with his own hands, and Anna would rest her head on his chest and listen to his heartbeat, that strong, steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack of her life. They would talk about their dreams, about the future they were building together, about the children they both hoped to have someday. Kieran would stroke her hair and kiss her forehead and tell her he loved her, and Anna would think about how lucky she was to have found this man, this partnership, this love that grew stronger with each passing day. In the spring of 1885, Anna discovered she was pregnant. She told Kieran one evening after supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. For a moment, he simply stared at her, processing the news, and then a smile spread across his face so wide and genuine that she felt tears spring to her eyes once more. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." He picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, then set her down gently as if she were made of spun glass. "I have to tell the boys," he said. "They are going to be uncles." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat made Anna feel constantly nauseated, and as her belly grew, even simple tasks became exhausting. But Kieran was endlessly patient, taking on more of the physical work without complaint, bringing her cold water and making sure she rested in the shade during the hottest parts of the day. His brothers visited often, bringing gifts for the baby and entertaining Anna with stories when she was too tired to do much else. Their son was born in November of 1885, after a labor that lasted from sunrise to sunset. Anna had never experienced pain like that, pain that seemed to tear her apart from the inside. But Kieran stayed with her through all of it, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation in the first place. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Kieran wept openly as he held his son for the first time. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Anna, he is perfect." They named him James, after Anna's father, and he had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair. From the very beginning, he was a happy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss, and both Anna and Kieran fell completely in love with him. The house was filled with the sounds of his cries and laughter, and Anna found that even in the midst of exhaustion, she had never been happier. Kieran proved to be a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with James in the middle of the night without complaint. He would talk to the baby as if he could understand every word, telling him about the horses and the wheat, about the desert and the mountains, about the life they were building together. Anna would watch them together, her heart so full of love she thought it might overflow, and she would thank God for the fever that had brought Kieran to her door, for the harvest that had needed saving, for the chain of events that had led them to this moment. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. James learned to walk and then to run, chasing chickens around the yard and helping his father in the barn. Anna gave birth to a daughter in 1887, a tiny girl they named Elizabeth, who had her father's serious eyes and her mother's stubborn determination. 2 years later, another son arrived, Henry, who was all energy and mischief from the moment he could crawl. The homestead prospered under their combined efforts. The wheat grew tall and golden each season, and Kieran's horse breeding operation began to attract buyers from all over the territory. They hired help during harvest time, and the Wyatt brothers remained frequent visitors, with Kyle eventually marrying Sarah Miller and building a house on the adjacent property to the west. The community grew around them, and Anna and Kieran became known as pillars of quartzsite society, the couple who had built something strong and lasting from humble beginnings. But for all their success, for all the comfort and prosperity they achieved, what mattered most to Anna were the quiet moments. Evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Mornings waking up beside the man she loved, his arm warm and heavy across her waist. The sound of her children's laughter mixing with Kieran's deeper voice as he played with them in the yard. These were the things that made life worth living, the simple everyday miracles that she had once thought she would never have. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised her with a gift, a delicate gold locket he had commissioned from a jeweler in Phoenix. Inside were tiny photographs of their 3 children, miniatures so small Anna marveled at the craftsmanship. She wore it every day from that moment on, this tangible reminder of the family they had created together. "You remember the day we met?" Kieran asked her that evening as they sat together on their porch, the children finally asleep inside. "When you nearly collapsed in my arms because you were too stubborn to admit you were sick," Anna laughed. "I remember thinking I could manage on my own because I always had before. I did not know how to ask for help." "I am glad I came along when I did," Kieran said, pulling her close against his side. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it, Anna. These 10 years have been the best of my life." "And the next 10 will be even better," Anna said, lifting her face for his kiss. "And the 10 after that and all the years beyond. We will grow old together, you and I, watching our children grow and have children of their own. We will build something that lasts, Kieran, something real and true." "We already have," he said softly and kissed her as the stars came out overhead. The years continued to unfold in their natural rhythm. James grew into a thoughtful young man who inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business. Elizabeth became a teacher, opening a small school in Quartzsite and teaching the children of the families who had settled the territory. Henry, true to his mischievous nature, became a lawman, keeping the peace in their growing town with a combination of humor and determination that made him beloved by the community. Anna and Kieran watched their children grow and leave to build their own lives, felt the strange mixture of pride and melancholy that came with seeing the people they had raised become independent adults. But they still had each other, and they still had the land they had worked together for so many years. They were no longer the young man and woman who had met over a harvest emergency, but their love had only deepened with time, weathered by hardship and strengthened by shared joy. On a warm evening in the spring of 1910, Anna and Kieran sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. They were in their 50s now, their hair shot through with gray, their hands marked by years of hard work. But when Kieran looked at Anna, he still saw the beautiful young woman who had been too stubborn to admit she needed help. And when Anna looked at Kieran, she still saw the cowboy who had brought his brothers and worked until dark to save her harvest. "You have any regrets?" Anna asked, taking his hand in hers. Kieran thought about it for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not a single one," he said. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life we built together. How could I regret any of that?" "I love you," Anna said simply. "I have loved you since the moment you caught me in that doorway, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," Kieran replied, bringing her hand to his lips just as he had done all those years ago on their first proper date. "You are my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure. Everything good in my life started the day I decided to ride over and check on why your wheat was not being harvested." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the land they had built together, the land that would pass to their children and their children's children. The homestead that had started as Anna's desperate attempt to honor her father's memory had become something far greater, a legacy of love and hard work, and the kind of partnership that only came from two people who truly understood and valued each other. Inside the house, they could hear sounds of activity. James had come for dinner with his wife and two children, and Elizabeth and Henry had joined them as well. The family gathering had stretched into the evening, filled with food and laughter and stories, and now the grandchildren were being put to bed in the rooms that had once belonged to their parents. "We should go back inside," Anna said, though she made no move to rise. "They will wonder where we have gone." "Let them wonder," Kieran said with a smile. "I want another moment alone with my beautiful wife." Anna laughed, the sound as bright and genuine as it had been when she was 23. "You are incorrigible," she said. "And you love me for it," Kieran replied. "That I do," Anna agreed, and kissed him as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. When they finally went back inside, it was to find their family gathered in the parlor, the children playing quietly while the adults talked about the day's events and made plans for tomorrow. Anna looked around the room at these people she loved, at the family she and Kieran had created together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. This was what mattered. This was what lasted. Not the wheat or the horses or the land, though all of those were important, but the love that bound them together, the connections that would continue long after she and Kieran were gone. James caught her eye and smiled, raising his glass of cider in a silent toast. Elizabeth was telling a story about one of her students, her hands moving expressively as she talked. Henry had fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, exhausted from a long day of work. And Kieran stood beside her, his arm around her waist, solid and steady and true, just as he had been from the very beginning. The seasons continued their endless cycle, bringing change and growth and the occasional challenge that needed to be overcome. There was a fire in 1912 that destroyed one of the barns, but the community came together to rebuild it in a matter of weeks. There was a particularly harsh winter in 1914 that killed off much of the wheat crop, but they had diversified enough by then that they could weather the loss. There were illnesses and accidents, joys and sorrows, all the ups and downs that came with living a full and meaningful life. Through it all, Anna and Kieran remained each other's constant. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still held hands when they thought no one was looking, still found reasons to steal kisses when they passed each other during the day. Their children teased them gently about being an old married couple, but even the teasing was affectionate, born of having grown up watching a relationship built on genuine love and respect. In 1918, when the war in Europe finally ended and Henry came home safely from serving overseas, the family gathered for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There was food and music and dancing, and Anna watched as Kieran danced with each of their daughters-in-law and then with Elizabeth, spinning them around the yard with the same grace he had shown when they first danced at their wedding. When he finally came back to her, slightly out of breath but grinning widely, Anna thought he had never looked more handsome. "Dance with me," he said, holding out his hand. "We are too old for dancing," Anna protested, even as she took his hand and allowed him to pull her close. "We are never too old for dancing," Kieran said, and guided her into a slow waltz as their family watched and clapped along. The 1920s brought new challenges as the country changed and modernized around them. Automobiles began to replace horses in town, and electricity came to Quartzsite, though Anna and Kieran were slow to have it installed in their house, content with the kerosene lamps they had used for decades. Their grandchildren grew into young adults, and then they began having children of their own, making Anna and Kieran great-grandparents and giving them a whole new generation to love and spoil. "How did we get so old?" Anna asked one day, looking at herself in the mirror and barely recognizing the white-haired woman who stared back at her. "We did not get old," Kieran said from where he sat on their bed, pulling on his boots. "We got blessed with years. There is a difference." Anna turned to look at him, this man who had been her companion for more than 40 years now, and felt her heart swell with love. He was right, of course. They had not just gotten old, they had been given the gift of time, time to build and grow and love and watch their family flourish. It was a gift not everyone received, and Anna was deeply grateful for every single day. In the summer of 1929, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from all over the county. The house and yard were filled with family and friends, with people whose lives had been touched by Anna and Kieran's kindness and generosity over the years. There were speeches and toasts, tears and laughter, and Anna stood beside her husband and marveled at how far they had come from that September day in 1883, when she had been too sick to finish the harvest alone. "Thank you," she whispered to Kieran during a quiet moment when they had stepped away from the crowd. "Thank you for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for helping me when I was too proud to ask, for loving me all these years." "Thank you for letting me," Kieran replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but dreams and determination. Thank you for building this life with me. I could not have asked for a better partner, Anna, not in 1,000 years." They held each other close as the celebration continued around them. Two people who had started as strangers and become soulmates, who had weathered every storm together and come out stronger on the other side. The harvest that had brought them together was long since forgotten by most people, just another story of neighborly kindness in a hard land. But for Anna and Kieran, it would always be the beginning of their greatest adventure, the moment when their separate paths had merged into one. As they rejoined the party, their great-grandchildren clamoring for attention and their children organizing yet another round of toasts, Anna caught Kieran's eye and smiled. He smiled back, that same warm, genuine smile that had captured her heart all those years ago, and Anna knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about her life. The fever that had nearly cost her everything had instead given her more than she could have ever imagined, and she would be grateful for that twist of fate for the rest of her days. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Anna and Kieran gradually handed over more of the daily operations of the homestead to James and his family, though they still helped where they could and offered advice when asked. They spent more time sitting on their porch, watching the world go by, content in each other's company. They talked about the past, reliving favorite memories, but they also talked about the present and the future, about the legacy they would leave behind and the family that would carry on their name. In the spring of 1935, Kieran fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor came from town and did what he could, but they all knew the truth. At 79 years old, Kieran's body simply did not have the strength to fight off the infection. Anna stayed by his side day and night, holding his hand and telling him stories about their life together, making sure he knew he was loved right up until the very end. He died on a Tuesday morning, the sun streaming through the bedroom window, with Anna's hand in his and his children gathered around his bed. His last words were for her, whispered so softly she had to lean close to hear them. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. "Thank you for loving me. Wait for me on the other side, Anna. I will find you, I promise." "I will wait," Anna whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "I will wait forever if I have to. I love you, Kieran. I love you so much." He squeezed her hand one last time, smiled at her with those creek water eyes she had loved for more than half a century, and then he was gone. The grief was profound, a physical ache that settled into Anna's bones and refused to leave. She had lost her father, had lived through hard times and heartbreak, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer emptiness of life without Kieran. For 51 years, he had been her partner, her best friend, her love. The house felt too quiet without his voice, the bed too empty without his warmth. She moved through the days mechanically, accepting condolences and sympathy, but unable to really feel anything except the gaping hole his absence had left in her life. Her children rallied around her, making sure she ate and slept and took care of herself. Her grandchildren visited often, bringing their own children to distract her with their energy and innocence. And slowly, very slowly, Anna began to find her way back to something resembling peace. The grief did not go away, but it became more bearable, less sharp. She learned to live with it, to carry it the way she had once carried water from the creek, a weight that was heavy but manageable. She took to sitting on the porch every evening, watching the sunset just as she and Kieran had done for so many years. She would talk to him sometimes, telling him about her day, about what the children were doing, about how much she missed him. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when the wind was just right and the light hit the wheat fields in a certain way, she could almost feel him there beside her, his hand in hers, his presence a comfort even in absence. Anna lived for another 8 years after Kieran's death, watching her great-grandchildren grow and welcoming a new generation of great-great-grandchildren into the world. She remained sharp and engaged until the very end, offering wisdom and love to everyone who came into her orbit. But those who knew her best could see that part of her was waiting, counting down the days until she could be reunited with the man she loved. She died peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1943, at the age of 83. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Kieran, a smile on her face and her hand clutching the gold locket he had given her on their 10th anniversary. Inside were still the tiny photographs of their 3 children, faded now with age but still visible, a testament to the family they had created together. They buried her beside Kieran in the small cemetery on the edge of town, under a cottonwood tree that provided shade even in the hottest part of summer. The whole county turned out for the funeral, people whose lives had been touched by Anna's kindness and generosity over the decades. There were tears and prayers, memories shared and stories told, and through it all, the overwhelming sense that something precious had been lost, but also that something beautiful had been preserved. James stood at his mother's grave after the service had ended, and everyone else had gone home, looking down at the simple headstone that read, Anna Wyatt, beloved wife, mother, and friend. Beside it was Kieran's stone, and James thought about how fitting it was that they were together even in death, just as they had been in life. They loved each other so much, Elizabeth said, coming to stand beside her brother. From the very beginning until the very end. That is rare, I think. That kind of love that lasts. It is rare, James agreed, but they worked for it. They chose each other every single day through good times and bad. That is what made it last. I hope I loved my husband half as well as mother loved father, Elizabeth said softly. You did, James assured her. They taught us all how to love, how to be partners, how to build something that endures. That was their gift to us. Henry joined them then, his lawman's uniform dusty from the road. I am going to miss her, he said simply. Even though I knew it was coming, even though she lived a long and full life, I am going to miss her. We all will, James said, but she is with him now. She spent 8 years waiting, and now she does not have to wait anymore. If there is any justice in the universe, they are together again, probably sitting on some heavenly porch watching the sunset and holding hands like they always did. The image made them all smile through their tears, and they stood together for a while longer, 3 siblings saying goodbye to the mother who had given them life and taught them how to live it well. When they finally left, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, and somewhere in the gentle evening breeze, they could almost hear their parents' laughter, young and joyful and free. The homestead remained in the family, passed down through generations just as Anna and Kieran had hoped. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the bones of the original cabin remained, a reminder of where it all started. The wheat fields continued to produce, and the horse breeding operation Kieran had started grew into one of the most respected in the state. But more than the land or the business, what endured was the story of how it all began. Every generation heard the tale of how their great-great-great-grandfather had ridden over to check on a sick neighbor and ended up finding the love of his life. They heard about the harvest that was saved by 4 brothers working until dark, about the courtship that followed, about the love that had lasted more than half a century and continued even beyond death. It became family legend, the story that was told at weddings and anniversaries, the example that was held up of what real love looked like. And on warm September evenings, when the wheat was ready for harvest, and the sun was painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold, those who were sensitive to such things swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old house, their hands intertwined, their heads bent close together as they watched the sunset. Some said it was just tricks of the light, shadows, and imagination, but others knew better. They knew that some loves were so strong, so true that not even death could truly separate them. They knew that Anna and Kieran had built something that would last forever, a love story that would be told as long as there was family to tell it. And somewhere beyond the veil that separated the living from the dead, in a place where the sun always set in brilliant colors and the wheat always grew tall and golden, Anna and Kieran Wyatt sat together on their porch, holding hands and watching the eternal sunset, together at last and forever, just as they had always promised each other they would be. The harvest was finished, the work was done, and all that remained was love, pure and simple and everlasting, the kind of love that made all the struggle and hardship worthwhile, the kind of love that made life itself a gift worth celebrating. Their story became a beacon for all who came after them, proof that even in the hardest of times, in the most unforgiving of places, love could take root and flourish. It showed that a single act of kindness could change the course of multiple lives, That saying yes to vulnerability and connection could lead to the greatest adventure of all. It demonstrated that real love was not just passion and romance, though those were certainly part of it, but also partnership and respect, hard work and compromise, choosing each other day after day, year after year, through everything life threw at you. The town of Quartzsite grew and changed over the decades, but the Wyatt homestead remained a constant, a touchstone for the community. Children would ride past on their bicycles and point to the house, telling their friends about the legendary love story that had started there. Young couples would visit the cemetery on their anniversaries, standing at Anna and Kieran's graves and promising each other that they would build a love that lasting. And the family continued to gather there for holidays and special occasions, filling the house with the same kind of laughter and love that Anna and Kieran had fostered all those years ago. The wheat still grew in the fields, golden and tall, waiting to be harvested. The horses still ran in the pastures, strong and beautiful. The land still produced and provided, just as it had since that September day in 1883, when a cowboy named Kieran Wyatt had noticed that his neighbor's wheat was ready, but her tools were still in the barn. He had made a choice that day, a simple choice to help someone in need, and that choice had rippled outward through time, creating waves of love and family and legacy that would continue for generations. And so the story ended where it began, with the harvest and the land and the enduring power of love. Anna had been too sick to finish the harvest alone, and Kieran had brought his brothers and worked until dark. But what had started as a simple act of neighborly kindness had become so much more. It had become a partnership that transformed two individual lives into one shared journey. It had become a family that spread across generations. It had become a love story for the ages, proof that the best things in life often came when you least expected them, from the most unlikely circumstances. The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the wheat swayed gently in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, if you listened carefully, you could hear the echo of laughter, the whisper of promises made and kept, the soft sound of two people who had found each other against all odds and held on tight through everything life brought them. Anna and Kieran's story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. And that, more than anything else, was what made it a story worth telling, a legacy worth preserving, a love worth celebrating for all time to come.